Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Breaking Muscle podcast. Today, I'm delighted to be joined even by Tony Gentilcore. Tony, how's it going?
Hello. Well, it's going well. You know, before we got live, I was congratulating you on the big English win yesterday. So things are well.
Yeah, the football or the soccer for many of our listeners, very exciting over here. England's the final. We'll see by the time this is recorded, we'll know the outcome. So maybe I should throw a prediction out there.
Do it. Yes.
I'm going to go bold. I think England will win.
Okay.
I'll tell you what, I'll go completely.
It's a bold stance.
Yeah. Completely against any previous history. I think England will win on penalties. Let's see. That would be a bit of a turn up. You got any predictions?
I'll go for England. I'm a fan. I will say it brings back memories because I was in London back in 2018 during the World Cup, and I was doing a workshop the day of the semifinal match, and I forget who they were playing in the semifinal match, but
it was Croatia.
Croatia. All I remember is that it was like mid-workshop. It was like noon. Like I had to shut it down. I shut the workshop down so they could watch the match for two and a half hours. It was hilarious. Like I wasn't going to compete with a World Cup match.
Yeah. Well, you can tell my level of confidence about making the final. I'm actually booked on a workshop myself this weekend, so I didn't think I would be behind other plans. Fortunately, it's an 8:00 kickoff over here, so in the evening. So I'll be back home.
Oh yeah, you'll be back in time. Okay, that's good. Yeah, so. Don't book it like a workshop right in the middle of the World Cup or the Euro Cup. Yeah, lesson learned on my end.
Yeah. Well, talking which, you're planning on coming over to London again, right? Or UK?
You know, that's the plan. I've been keeping my tabs on the news over here and over there in terms of like, okay, amber list, green list, unvaccinated, vaccinated, like, do I have to quarantine? There was good news yesterday. I saw that I guess on the 19th, like people in England will be able to travel to amber listed countries. It's still unclear what that means for international travelers coming to the UK. So, I'm really keeping I hedged my bets back in like May that things were going to open up, and I purchased my flight, my hotel, and I booked 2 workshops over there, one in Manchester, one in London. I'm still hopeful that they'll still happen, but I've obviously have not been very aggressive with promoting it just because the optics of like, hey, I'm coming over. I don't know if I can I'm hedging my bets that it's still going to happen. Well, it was good news yesterday.
Yeah, absolutely. Fingers crossed we'll get there. But who knows? I mean, with our government and the way things go, who knows? It'll change. It'll change a lot. But everyone is very positive about September being a kind of back to normal situation.
Sure.
So fingers crossed. Fingers crossed for that.
Yes, it's about time.
But we'll definitely talk a little bit more detail about that. Not that particular workshop, perhaps, but workshops in general. But before we do, I'm sure 99.9% of the people listening to this are aware of you and know your stuff, read your articles, Men's Health on your blog, T Nation, all these various different outlets. But for anyone who's not entirely sure, maybe they know you from your time at Cressey Performance, for example.
Sure.
Could you give us a little bit of background? If we take it way back, because you actually yourself were an athlete, pitcher in baseball, right?
I was. I played many sports as a young child. I grew up in a very rural, small town in central New York in the Finger Lake region. And like the closest neighbor, was a mile away, like a lot of cornfields, a lot of dairy farms. So my time killer was playing sports. So eventually baseball ended up being my sport of choice. And I had the great opportunity to play in college, and, I was this close to maybe being signed professionally. It just didn't work out. And then, kind of went toward being a personal trainer and strength coach after that. Cause that was something, of course, as well, that I picked up at a pretty early age, lifting weights and, seeing how that would help me perform better on the baseball field, and maybe getting, people of the opposite sex to notice me more.
Yes.
The latter part didn't work quite as well as that, but yeah, I played sports all through college, and certainly that boded very well for eventually working, co-founding Cressey Sports Performance, where we ended up working with a lot of overhead athletes, baseball players in particular. So that worked out well in my favor for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's interesting. So, I mean, it's quite similar to my path, but mine was rugby, and then I had a career-ending injury. But I don't know if this was the same for you, but I actually didn't like lifting initially. I really enjoyed the sport, and I was naturally really skinny. And obviously in rugby, you want to be the big guy. So I would do anything to avoid the gym. And then eventually I got bitten by the bug and fell in love with it. But, somewhat too late.
Came to the dark side.
Exactly. Yeah. But I mean, genuinely, like, my idea of like being out running would have been like what I would enjoy back then. And the idea of lifting weights, I would hate it. But now that's completely flipped. But for you, did you immediately enjoy and get some fulfillment from training and seeing the results in the gym?
Yeah. The impetus for me wasn't so much sports as it was watching a lot of Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone movies in the 80s. Like my childhood was in the 80s. My formidable years were in the 90s, like high school, college, young adulthood. So growing up in the 80s, it was nearly impossible not to watch He-Man and Commando and Rambo and like, man, those guys are pretty jacked. That look kind of cool to look like that. And I just kind of naturally gravitated toward lifting weights. And quote unquote, Santa Claus brought my first weight set when I was like 12 or 13. Mm-hmm. I put it in the basement of my parents' house, and it was one of those plastic covered cement weights. And like every kid basically had as their first weight set. And I followed along with the poster. And I have fond memories of doing a lot of bicep curls in front of the mirror, listening to like hip hop and Public Enemy and Wu-Tang Clan and stuff like that. So, and sure, I have no doubts that it certainly helped me in my baseball career in high school. Like again, it was a very small high school, so. I was playing at the JV level in 8th grade, and I was playing the varsity level starting in 9th grade. So I which is pretty good. I was playing alongside, I was 13, 14 playing alongside 15, 16, 17 year olds. And then, not many kids from my hometown would play above the high school level and go into the collegiate level. And I was able to do that. And I was very thankful and fortunate to be able to do that. But yeah, certainly it stuck around for sure. Like I've been lifting weights since I was 13, and I'm 44 now. So I like it.
yeah, exactly. But you maybe took to it a little earlier. I mean, actually, interestingly, I remember I enjoyed doing those bicep curls in front of the mirror with that set at home where no one was there to judge me. That my thing was more when it suddenly had to be in the group or a team training session and other people could see quite how little you could lift. That's when I was like, really trying to avoid that. And that's when I didn't enjoy it. So seeing the bicep vein curling with terrible form in front of the mirror and back at home, that was fine by me. But doing that in front of my peers, not so much.
Oh man, I wish I had a time machine though. If I could just go back in time and tell like current Tony to pass Tony, like, hey, do this instead. Like, why don't you like put the bar on the ground and lift it off the ground and deadlift it and like put it on your back and maybe do some squats. I might have had a different athletic career if I actually lifted like I would be now, or how I would train my athletes now. But it was certainly a good habit to latch onto at an early age, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. And I suppose you kind of in a roundabout way, you maybe not been able to go back and teach young Tony, but you've had that influence on a whole bunch of other kids and their careers and had a really positive and been able to help them. So imagine I'm sure that's one of the motivating factors behind it, but it's also incredibly rewarding to go through that and see, maybe being their guide and using the wisdom that wasn't there for yourself.
Well, particularly when I was at Cressey Sports Performance. So we established that gym in 2007, and I was there until 2015. And I can think of at least 5 athletes that I started working with when they were in 8th or 9th grade who ended up signing professional baseball contracts. So, I mean, talk about rewarding. I started with that kid when he was 13, 14, and then now he's playing at a professional level, like through college, and then signed a professional contract. Yes, absolutely a very rewarding experience. And, as a strength and conditioning coach, sure, part of the job is exercise execution and dosing and loading and like teaching stuff correctly. But, you know, we're trying to mold young young human beings as well. So it's about accountability and, you know, treating your parents well. And there's a lot of other factors that come into being a fitness professional other than just showing someone like proper deadlift form. Certainly that's a big component. Like there's no question there, but there's other life factors from a role model standpoint that came into fruition working with young athletes. And that was always kind of a rewarding aspect of it as well.
Yeah. So building better people, not just better athletes, I suppose, is a nice little catchphrase for that. But incredibly rewarding. And I suppose my career has mostly been, you know, working as a trainer in central London, people that are actually by and large older than me, but I've had, you know, a few guys like, help them sort of on a volunteer basis for like the London Youth Games. And I remember it's like a different buzz when you get someone, and also you see the potential and how, you know, you feel like you can have a really positive impact on them. It's
hard to beat that. It's a very rewarding career for sure. And now, like, I don't really work with many athletes now. Like the bulk of my current clientele are Gen Pop people. I have a small training studio here in Boston now, and the 95% of my clientele is just your normal average lawyer, doctor, person who just wants to move better and feel better, dad and mom. And certainly it's very rewarding to take somebody who has had chronic lower back pain or chronic knee pain, or, you know, is like super deconditioned, and proving to them that they can do stuff, you know, like say, taking someone who couldn't do a body weight chin up to now they're repping out 5 to 10. Like that's pretty cool.
Yeah. And, getting someone to do something they didn't think was possible is amazing.
Oh, of course. Yeah. It's awesome. So there aren't, you know, I think we're lucky in that there aren't many professions in the world where that is the thing. You know, we're not doing spreadsheets, thankfully, and, you know, calculus and accounting or brain surgery, but yeah, it's very fortunate that, you know, I've been able to, you know, develop a niche in the industry and a name in the industry, and that it's allowed me to make a living. It's kind of cool.
It is.
I get to wear sweatpants for work. Like, come on, what's better than that? Come on. Like,
a little until the pandemic hit, and then everyone.
The pandemic's like that was my life before the pandemic. I was like, what's the big deal? Like,
what was all the fuss? So actually, like, interesting there, we talked about a little bit about an overview of your career path, and that's something I want to sort of look into in terms of different avenues as someone progresses. But now you are a gym owner, and that's sort of almost like, some people feel like that's the end goal, right? I do my time in a big gym, maybe then I move to a place like where I rent space and I get a bit more control myself, but I don't have the bills, and then I get nice and busy. I'm making big revenue. The dream is the gym. Now, as someone who followed that path and had a gym for 3 years and then decided, well, that was not a good idea. I did not enjoy that process particularly, and has said things like, I will never run a gym again. Who knows? But how's that been for you? I know your path was, you know, you some of that kind of journey I talked about is pretty similar, I believe, to what you started out, didn't you, in New York, and then moved out?
Yeah. So the early stages of my career, I was just your normal personal trainer the first 5 years of my career. So I toiled around in corporate fitness and commercial gyms as like just your run-of-the-mill personal trainer. And also that I started at a time when the internet in particular, with like training forums on T Nation and other various websites where, you know, I know forums aren't really a thing anymore, but back then is what it was. And, you know, interacting with other professionals across the state and the country, and just like, oh my God, like I never knew that. I didn't even know like a site like T Nation existed until after I graduated college. And I started reading the site. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And, you know, being introduced to these different coaches that had phenomenal information, and, you know, and then eventually, because I crossed paths with Eric Cressey via the internet, and he and I were very active in various forums and training websites, and we crossed paths a lot, actually. And then eventually I ended up moving to Connecticut, where he was working as a trainer out of a gym, and he said, hey, they're looking for another trainer, you should come interview. And I often joke, it's like I had this awkward conversation with my mom. I was like, hey, I met this dude on the internet and I'm moving to Connecticut. Like, I'm not exaggerating. That's how it went. And it was quite funny. And it ended up turning out just fine. Like, he wasn't an axe murderer or anything like that. And so we were actually roommates for 2 years working in Connecticut. And then we both eventually moved to Boston, which then eventually, along with Pete Dupuis, we opened up Cressey Sports Performance. And I kind of famously said in the years that I was at Cressey Sports Performance that, hey, I never want to own a gym. Like, being part of like a team that, starts this brand and kind of being an ambassador of a brand, I'm down with that. Like, I forget what book it is, but I identified more as a technician, where I show up to work, because there's like entrepreneur, technician, and I don't know, there's another one.
The E-Myth, right? Is that the book?
It might have been the E-Myth. Yeah, you might be right. Yeah, exactly it. And, as a technician, my role, yes, I was an ambassador of the brand, was to show up, be a coach, do that well, and then go. But what was also cool about that, Eric and I and Pete, to a degree, all had our own kind of individual brands that we were also building underneath the umbrella of Cressey Sports Performance. So, that was also the same time that I was building my website and my blog and writing a little bit more, and then eventually being able to write on T Nation and Men's Health, and eventually, yes, start doing workshops, etc. But I remember I wrote like a blog or two saying I never want to own a gym. Like, I don't fall into this mind trap that the gold standard of the industry is gym ownership, because I do think a lot of incoming trainers or young trainers, they think that is the end game. Like, you can only make it in this industry if you own a gym. And I don't agree with that mentality at all, because I think you could attest to it that it's not, it is not an easy endeavor. Like, no. You're not just going to like buy this fancy equipment, turn on the lights, and people are going to show up. That's not how it works.
Well, no, apparently not. That's what I found
out. No. I kind of came into this nice little situation where there was a woman here that was like a mile from my apartment here in Boston, who was kind of searching for someone to sublease the space to use when she wasn't there using it herself. And it was a tiny, like 500 square foot little studio. And I got to the point in my career at Cressey Sports Performance where it's like, I've kind of hit my ceiling in terms of like earning potential. And, there's these other things I would like to start doing. I just gotten married. And so then my wife and I were starting to talk about, okay, what do we want our life to kind of turn out to be? And, with our respective careers. And so I started toying with the idea of like, maybe I can kind of like dip my toe into like, I like the days that I don't go into Cressey Sports Performance, maybe I could start doing some, like personal training at another gym, but just not own it, but just kind of do my own thing. And so it's exactly what ended up happening. Like I ended up subleasing the space and just basically paying rent for hourly use for the space. And then fast forward 6 months, she basically ended up punting it to me. And then I was like, well, why don't I just do this? Why don't I put pencil to paper and figured out that it was actually going to be more like cheaper for me to, if I were to recruit 1 or 2 coaches to sublease under me to like help with overhead. And that way I can still do my thing as a coach. And then when I'm not there, it's still being utilized. That it actually would be kind of like a nice side revenue stream actually. So that's what I've been doing for the past 5 years, 6 years. And now I'm at a point where I've been trying to find a bigger space to scale the business, and then, but it's with the pandemic kind of throwing a monkey wrench into that. It's been a little bit hard, but I'm hopeful that maybe something will happen next year. There's some availability in the area, but the idea is like to have myself do my thing and then maybe have 5 to 10 coaches and just providing a space where they can thrive.
Yes.
Because I do think especially now, there are many personal trainers and coaches who have been working at commercial gyms, and they're kind of in this like conundrum of like, it's like, I'm not getting as much of a percentage as I want. And And first of all, there's this whole thing that they think they're getting screwed when they're not. Like they fail to realize that the gym has bills to pay and people, and like it isn't like they're profiting like the other like 75% of the commission you're making. It's like it actually is liability insurance and cam fees and all this other stuff. So but I do think there's a need or a want for a lot of professionals who are intimidated of like setting off on their own, like, you know, because they might not have the means to like buy all the equipment necessary and then outfit a gym. So I would be the one that would outfit the gym and provide the space, and then, you know, vet all the coaches that are there, which is what I do now. Like currently I have 4 coaches who sublease under me. And they all do pretty well. They all run their own show. They're not employees of mine because I had no interest in managing anyone. But they've been vetted by me. So a lot of them were either former interns of Cressey Sports Performance or they've just been coaches I've known in the area for a while. You know, it's one advantage of being somewhat old and having a lot of career capital is I know people in the industry. And not that I'm expecting them to have the same philosophical approach as me as a coach, but they're all pretty close. And I know they're all very competent and they're doing a good job. But I kind of like the idea of like even getting a bigger space, scaling a little bit more and making it a sexy space, including physical therapy. And also what will be the little like outlier would be my wife, who is a psychologist and is very much like in tune with my part of the industry and being like consulting for a lot of trainers and gyms and having a mental health component to the services provided, which I think is becoming less taboo. Especially during the pandemic. So I kind of like this idea of like a cross-pollination of services, which I think I've seen it already. Like I've had this mass influx of interest of people wanting to train at smaller studios rather than going back to these larger commercial gyms, you know, because of being around people and their body fluids and like, you know, like it being kind of gross. So that's kind of like, I know I went a little bit on a rant there, but that's kind of where I'm at with regards to gym ownership is that it is not for everyone. I don't think it's a panacea of like, you know, like fitness, wealth, and, you know, that you've made it. But, you know, if you're going to do it, I always say start small and build from there. And then, but this kind of like, what's the word for it? Maybe like a co-op operation. I think is becoming a little bit more popular in the industry, and I think it makes it a little bit more palatable.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's interesting to see different things coming out and how people are. I don't know what's the catchword or buzzword. Sorry, was pivot. People are pivoting, but one thing that's happening here is gyms are opening up and they're basically for hire for you exclusively. Real small spaces, but they're well equipped. And you know, you pay a premium, but you can go as a trainer, you can have it to be with a client, or if you're just an individual who wants to train and you don't want to be around anyone, you can have your own little room kitted out. And obviously real estate in central London is pretty expensive, so having a big facility here is difficult. I mean, imagine over in Boston it's also pretty expensive, right?
It's not, I wouldn't say it's London expensive, but it's a very expensive city.
Not many places are London expensive.
And my studio is 500 square feet. I don't know in terms of like metric feet what that equates to. It's small. But I operate in a semi-private format, so I don't do one-on-one training. Like I do the initial assessments that are one-on-one. I think that's important. But I'm a semi-private model. I'll work with 2 or 3 people at the same time. They're all working off their own program that I write. They're all individualized programs. And then I'm kind of doing like coaching triage where I'm like, my head's on a swivel. You know, if someone's doing their squat set, I'm watching that and providing feedback. And then my head's turning over here and I'm fixing somebody's push-up technique or, you know, I'm just putting on some sick hip hop beats and, you know, just playing DJ for 10 minutes. Who knows? Like, it's like, and that's a format that I adopted when I was at Cressey Sports Performance. We took like a collegiate strength and conditioning format and applied it to general population, which I think a lot of, I'm a big fan of the semi-private model. I think it works for the trainer because it's more it allows you to scale your business. Like, you theoretically you can make more money per hour by training 2 or 3 people at a time rather than one. And I do find that the clients enjoy it well. Like, they feed off the energy of the other people there, and people develop relationships and friendships. And it's like, it's very much like the missing component, I think, in the success of any gym is the idea of community. And that's places like Mark Fisher Fitness in New York City do that. Like, they're probably the gym in the States that do it the best. Like, Mark Fisher and Michael Keeler are the guys when it comes to building community, setting up systems, etc. I mean, I'm sure you've had them on your podcast before. If you haven't, you should. Well,
there you go.
Excellent.
There's the answer to one of my later questions. You can think of someone else, because I will ask you for a guest suggestion, but we'll bank that one already, and we'll get another one later.
Count them in.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, and also I can think of CrossFit. I mean, I'm not a CrossFit type of coach, but certainly it's hard to bash the power of the community that they've built over the course of the last 2 decades. Yes, there's certainly things that I don't like about CrossFit, but there are more things that I like about it than I dislike. And one of the things I like a lot is their sense of community. I mean,
yes,
you can't really, it's hard to match it. I mean, there's people that hang out just to watch other people work out and cheer them on. I mean, what's better
incredible
than that?
They've nailed that.
Yeah. So I think, even this idea I do think the semi-private model bodes well for that, in terms of like this idea of community and people just feeding off the energy of other people.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because I know in the States, semi-private is a relatively popular approach, right? There's plenty of businesses doing well. I'm not sure of many in the UK that really do great out of it. There are some, but I think it's a cultural thing. Like, basically, we're miserable, shy, antisocial people. That's a massive generalization, but it's one of those. I've tried it because I know, like, probably someone who influenced you when you guys set it up, but like Alan Cosgrove was a big proponent of this.
Well, right? Alan was he was the big mentor of ours when we opened up Cressey Sports Performance. Like, him and Eric were going back and forth quite a bit on, this idea of the semi-private model and how it could work well with the Gen Pop setting. Alan was one of the first people that popularized it, of course.
So we ended up with when me and my buddy, when we set our place up, it was 2010, and like one of your by that point we'd seen Cressey. I think DeFranco's was another gym that was getting a lot of like social media, maybe not social media, but on the internet a lot at the time, and looking at things at Alan Cosgrove, and we were like trying to how can we integrate this. And the way we ended up having to do it, like people wanted their one-to-one session. They wanted to feel special, and they liked they were prepared to pay the premium for that. So we had to almost have classes put in. So there was like a strongman crew, and that would happen every Saturday at 9 a.m. And then you'd get all that benefit. They'd come in, but somehow, because they could frame that differently. I don't know exactly why, but we could have it a few times a week, but we couldn't make it, this is what you always do.
Yeah.
It was weird, because they would love the session. They'd be buzzing about that, but somehow they just they liked that one-to-one time as well.
And some people, I mean, I've had people reach out who once I tell them that what my format is, semi-private, and selfishly I do it for my own reasons. Like, my time is valuable, and from a monetary standpoint, it just makes more sense for me as a business owner. And as someone who's also traveling for workshops and writing, and it just makes more sense for me from a time standpoint to do the semi-private. But I've had some people say, hey, I don't think I'm going to be a fit. And then I just refer them to one of the other coaches that sublease that do one-on-one training.
Yeah.
And it's still in a side way, it like does help me, because if I'm helping my other coaches get clients, I mean, it only helps me, so, but I understand that it's not everyone's cup of tea, of course.
I've always found it interesting, because we've tried a few times, and it's never really flown for us, but like, I know that there's plenty of guys doing really well with it. So
yeah, and one-on-one is not dead at all. Like, I know that I've seen some people say, "Oh, one-on-one training is dead," and I'm like, I don't know about that. Like, there's still people who do very well with that.
Yeah. I think they're the same people that want you to sign up for their 6-figure Fit Pro.
Exactly. Yeah, they're 24 doing life coaching. Yeah.
Those are the guys. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
They manage to get in your Instagram feed too, do they?
Oh yes.
So looking at this gym thing. So there's a couple of things like, so talking about that technician, I think that was a good point. One of the mistakes me and my friend, when we set ours up, we're two technicians. Now, when with you and Eric and Pete, obviously had great success initially, and then you've presumably learned a ton from that that's now served you really well. I got the impression that whilst all good technicians, there's different skill sets, and I always sort of got the impression that Eric was quite entrepreneurial, and driven in that regard. And I feel like Pete's got a good business head on him from what little I know, but and I'm by no means an expert on these things. But
well, that's what helped us a lot. I think that's what, and when we opened up Cressey Sports Performance again in 2007, I mean, we're not talking like the Ice Age or anything, but in hindsight, it's quite a long time ago. What helped us was that Eric and I, because we were coaches and quote unquote the technicians, we were the ones writing the programs, and we were on the gym floor coaching. And Pete was the business guy, and he was the one that was answering the phones and scheduling and making sure the bills are being paid and doing. So it helped us. Like he could do the business stuff because he was the business guy, the business director, and then Eric and I could coach and not to mention work on our own personal brands at the same time with our writing and doing videos and building our social media platforms and stuff like that. So I think, if I had to have like a roadmap, if I could provide a roadmap for people who are interested, I do think it would be in your favor. I keep saying boat in the favor. No, that's like my word of the day today. I think you'd be remiss not to consider having someone who is the business person. Like their role in the company is SEO or whatever you want to call it, and like lead development and answering the phones and doing all that stuff. So then you can be the one that's writing the programs and doing the coaching and doing what you do best.
Do what you do best and what you're enjoying as well.
Right. So, but I will say, thinking back when I left and I started my own thing, I was quite surprised in myself because it was very intimidating. Because I don't consider myself a savvy business person by any stretch, comparatively speaking. Like I'm obviously doing something right because I have a business still, but I was quite surprised on how much I just kind of unconsciously absorbed being around Pete and Eric for 7-8 years. A lot of business is intuition. Don't spend more than you have. Like it's like, if you do that, and I will say the one philosophy that helped me the most was the Profit First philosophy, the book Profit First.
Okay.
That revolutionized how I managed my money. So I knew where's everything going? And then at the end of the month, where is it going to go in terms of I have to make sure I plan for my taxes. I have to make sure I have my business expenses covered. I have to make sure that, my wife and I have money to pay our bills. And then there's my separate account, which is my quote unquote profit account that I just use for whatever I want it to be used for. So that helped me tremendously, just having that book. And it's a very thin book. It's not intimidating at all. But yeah, I was quite surprised in how well I absorbed stuff from both Eric and Pete from when I was at CSP to when I went off on my own. Because again, a lot of it is just common sense and intuition. But even still, like if you were to talk to Pete, he knows the numbers by heart. He'd be able to tell you how many sessions they did in May of 2018, what the revenue was. You asked me that currently, I'd be lucky if I could tell you how many active clients I have currently in terms of numbers, but certainly there's some semblance of structure there, and I don't want to make myself sound like a complete nincompoop, but yeah, it's my strengths are definitely as a coach, and writing is my strength. I wouldn't say my strength is being making memes on social media and, but I do lean into this idea, if you're really good at what you do and you're an authentic person, people are going to seek you out and find you. So, I try not to overthink that front.
That makes sense.
I think it's just keep it simple.
Yeah. Good advice. But I think also, as we've sort of indicated, we're not sure that, people need to put gym ownership up on this pedestal as
no,
this
not
is the
at
be
all.
all end all. By the same token, it can be very successful. And one of the pieces of advice, people ask me about it and should they do it, is that I'm always like, well, are you really excited about the business side of things? And if not, have you got someone you can partner up with? Because
yes, exactly.
That was a huge mistake that I think we made. We were just like, look, if we will provide a better quality of training to the other people, and that's good enough. And it's like, how about letting people know about that? It's all well and good having in your four walls great potential for training, but if no one's in there doing it and you're not letting anyone know. So yeah, there was some lessons learned there, but yes, get involved with someone who's good at business if you want to go that way.
Yeah, if you can. And I mean, and I guess worst case scenario, you hire somebody to be your coach to help you with that. I mean, coaches need coaches too. So, as an example, like I have someone who writes my training programs. Like I'm the last person I want to write a training program for is myself. I write enough. The last person I want to do is myself. But there have been in years past where I've been part of mentorships, and I have colleagues who I can reach out to that I've asked questions on. And even currently, I have a friend of mine who, as of the past, I don't know, several months, he and I meet every other Tuesday morning, and we just kind of like bounce ideas off each other. Hey, what's going on in your end? What's going on in your business? What's going on with mine? How's searching for the gym going? And he's doing work with the national team and over in Israel, the biking team. And I'm asking him how he's doing that, negotiating his contract. And so I do think worst case, like doing something like that, where you just kind of have kind of like, I guess what would be called, not mentorship, but kind of like peer supervision.
Yeah, like
as my wife would call it.
Your network as well, or something, I suppose.
Yes. Well, networking is a big factor too. Yeah, I think. I mean, that's kind of like the big thing with attending workshops and continuing education when we're allowed to do it is like that. Yeah, the networking component is that's a huge deal.
Yeah.
So I would certainly advocate for anyone listening to. Not that you have to read like 10 different books. I mean, there's all of them are pretty much the same. Like I am kind of in love with Profit First, but if anything, like you just seek out the individuals that are good at that stuff and, ask questions and hopefully you got someone in your network that will, at the very least, you could just do some peer supervision with.
Yeah, I completely agree with the coaching thing for your own training, but also for the business. I mean,
Yes.
a few years back, I did the same things. Like I would not consider myself a good businessman. So sort someone out who has had a lot of success within the fitness industry.
I mean, I mentioned, I'm sorry to cut you off, Tom.
Go ahead.
I mean, we mentioned Mark Fisher and Michael Keeler earlier, and they have a wonderful mentorship program called Business for Unicorns. That to me is kind of like the gold standard right now in the industry. Pat Rigsby is another person who does a really good job. Another one is Eric Malzone. Okay. He's a friend of mine. I was part of his mentorship a few years ago, and he does a lot of the same business coaching for fitness professionals. So there are, I mean, it is an investment, but if you're investing in yourself, I mean, it's going to pay for itself most likely, you can't be too timid by the idea of like, oh my God, it costs X amount this month. I mean, first of all, you should seek out people who actually are good at what they do. I just gave you 4, and it's an investment, and I guarantee like it will pay for itself.
And
it takes all the pressure off.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think, like you say, don't click on one of these 6-figure gurus on
Instagram. Stay away from. Don't search Instagram for these people.
Find someone with a proven track record. Absolutely. But then, much like. I suppose there's some people don't go on workshops because they think, it costs this much, but you'll earn back the admission to that
all the time.
That workshop in in a few days probably.
All the time.
So workshops tells us another. There's a little segue to another thing I want to talk about, like with people, their career path. One way is obviously owning a gym and hopefully scaling that up, but another is sort of becoming like an educator within the industry, and that's obviously something that you do. A bunch of when you can, a bunch of workshops in person, but now there's certain workshops are available in an online capacity, as well as sort of online products and things like this that people use. So I suppose let's look at workshops. But first thing, when was your first workshop that you presented?
Oh man, there's a funny story with that. My first workshop was when I first started dating my wife. She was an adjunct professor at a university here in Boston, and she had a colleague who was very much involved with the onboarding of the incoming freshman class. So she had asked me, it's like, hey, Tony, like you're a fitness professional. Could you come in and speak to this incoming class about just like strategies of like better nutrition when they're going into the cafeteria? And I mean, I'm not a nutritionist. I'm not a registered dietitian. I mean, I know the difference between a carb, a fat, and a protein. Like I know my way around the food pyramid and stuff like that. But I was like, sure, I think it was a 45-minute talk. I was like, sure, I'll do it. And they were going to pay me for it. So I was going to be compensated. And I remember the night prior, I just had this panic attack. I woke up in the middle of the night, like 2 a.m, and woke my then girlfriend up, now wife. And I was like, babe, I don't think I can do it. I'm going to cancel. Like, I'm just going to say I'm sick. I can't do it. And it was bad. And you know, she being the psychologist, she kind of talked me through it. Like, hey, what's the worst thing that could happen? Like, what would be the worst case scenario? Then she talked me through it. And long story short, I ended up doing it. And I don't think I sucked. I mean, I think I was, you know, it gave maybe a B- if I had to grade myself. And that was my first, and I got through it. But what really stuck with me is that after the fact, when she and I were discussing it, maybe a year or two down the road, when I started doing more workshops, we kind of had a laugh about that one I just told you about. And it might not be verbatim, but she says something to the effect of like, I knew that if you didn't do that, you would have done it in the future. And that really hit me. That like punched me in the face. I was like, wow, like that is 100% true. Because if I didn't do that, if I really did call in and say, hey, I'm sick, I can't do it, who knows? I probably would not be doing what I do now.
Yeah.
So yeah, that just kind of naturally progressed to being asked to, you know, present at local workshops. And then Dean Somerset and I ended up collaborating on a lot of workshops together. I mean, he and I presented together over the last 6, 7, 8 years, at least 25, 30 times, because we do the complete shoulder hip blueprint, which has taken us across North America and the world. I mean, it's surreal to me, the places I've been in the world to present. I mean, I never would have thought that I would be doing that ever. And so it's been lovely. And, you know, we have 2 iterations of the complete shoulder hip blueprint that we have out as a digital product. You know, not to mention during the pandemic, obviously I had to cancel all workshops. And I did a digital, not digital, but I did an online version or a Zoom version of my coaching competency workshop. And ended up doing that over the course of 3 weeks. So instead of doing like, okay, everyone, I'm going to do a Zoom workshop for 7 hours, which nobody was interested in. No one wanted, I mean, we had enough of Zoom last year.
Yes.
I was like, okay, instead of doing 1 7-hour Zoom session that no one is going to be at all interested in, I'm going to divide it up between 2 and 3 hour sessions over the course of 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And I ended up getting a nice number of people to attend that. You know, and then, like I said earlier, like now we're at a point where I'm starting to book stuff, it's been nice to put stuff into the calendar rather than taking it out. But still nowhere near what I was pre-pandemic in terms of stuff that's booked.
Yes.
But I will say, like, the idea of workshops has been a nice alternate revenue stream for me, for sure. And much of the way it's subsidized travel. Like, yes. You know, I'm able to like travel to these cool places in the world and everything is, and make income off it, which is great. But I do thoroughly enjoy working and coaching and teaching other fitness professionals. And, you know, I'm never someone that says, hey, my way, you got to absolutely do it the way I do it. I never say that, but it's like, here's what's worked for me. I think it can work for you guys and help you be a better coach and help build better rapport with your clients and hopefully help you make a little bit more money. And yeah, it's been great. And I'm looking forward to 2022 and getting the show back on the road.
Yeah, absolutely. I bet. So this is interesting, that story. Like you almost had, I don't know if it's imposter
Oh
syndrome.
man, it was bad. Yeah. Well, at that point, I mean, I think I still get it. I mean, I think we all get some semblance of imposter syndrome. Doing public speaking. I mean, I think if you polled most people what are their top 3 fears in life, public speaking is probably in the top 3 for a lot of people. Me, it's like snakes, public speaking, and kipping pull-ups. It's like those are like my 3 biggest fears. And like I said, I never would have imagined, back in the day that I'd be doing public speaking. And I'm not saying I'm a fantastic public speaker, but I'm pretty good. Like I feel like I'm a very engaging presenter, and I speak very much how I write. And anyone who's familiar with my writing knows that I very much do not take that too seriously. Like it's infotainment. Like I want to provide good information and help people learn, but you got to do it in a way that's engaging, and keeps people's attention, because people's attention spans nowadays is like 7 seconds, if that. Yeah. So, so I've found a nice way of how I present, and it's fantastic. So, I would encourage other fitness professionals, like if you are a coach, personal trainer, to find, whether it's writing, whether it's doing videos, whether it's presenting, I think at some point it's smart to develop other ways of accruing income, because if the pandemic taught us anything, it's that, if you're just coaching people in person and that's shut down, what are you going to do? Yeah. I think the pandemic, if there was like a silver lining in our industry, that was probably it. It got people to realize that, hey, I need to kind of, I hate saying it, pivot, and kind of figure out what are my other strengths here, and how can I use those to help me make a living.
Yeah, great advice, and I think reassuring for other people that someone who's now done so many workshops, had those doubts, and still to some extent has them.
Sure.
And from my point of view, me and a colleague of mine, we'll be talking about doing something. It's always when you talk about it and then you don't quite push the button on it, and so got to make it happen. Just get the first one out of the way, and then it's okay.
That's the hardest part. It's just like the adage in our industry is like the hardest part of your workout is showing up. Yeah. I say that to clients all the time. The hardest part is showing, because we all know that once they're done with it, they're going to feel fantastic.
Yes.
And that was very much my experience with public speaking. It was like I just had to get it over with, and then it ended up being okay. So
sometimes it's hard to take your own advice, though, right?
and you got to realize too. I mean, I even say this a lot with writing, because I get reached out to quite often, like, hey, how do I get better at writing, or how do I write for T Nation or Men's Health, or how do I get more people to read my stuff? And I just tell people, like, very bluntly, and I say it in a way that's very professional and articulate, and take their feelings into account. But it's like, stop emailing me and all these other people who are probably emailing the same question, and just do it. Like, fucking write. Like,
yeah.
That's the only way you're going to get better at doing it. And it's going to suck. You are not going to be good in the beginning. It's not going to be good. But the more you do anything, the better you get. And that's what I did. And again, I'm not saying I'm like the world's greatest writer, but I'm okay.
Yeah.
And it's just, you got to start and just get over that hump.
Yeah, I get the same thing for people with writing as well. And like I say, like, write your own blog, because the great thing is you get to fail technically in public, but no one's actually reading it, just your mum.
True. True.
So you could just write some words, and then then I did a guest post for someone who I kind of knew.
That's a great way of doing it.
And then someone else was like, I like this article, can you write one for me? And then next thing you know, like you say, you can be Men's Health, Men's Fitness, T Nation, Arsenal Strength, Breaking Muscle, bodybuilding.com, all of these places suddenly, but you just kind of, you do the work, and if you do good work, like you said.
I'm sure you're familiar with Lou Schuler.
Yes.
And I remember a piece of advice he gave years ago that I remember that really stuck with me, because he is always asked by, I mean, he's been an editor and fitness writer for years. And he said something to the effect of, like, when the industry is ready for you, it will let you know. So if you're somebody who's out there writing a blog and like, oh, I really like to break through with one of these bigger publications, like, if it's good, it's going to be bred, and people are eventually going to seek you out. So you just got to stick with it and think about, okay, what's your target audience? Like, do you have a specialty? Like, are you bodybuilding? Are you powerlifting? Are you more gen pop? Are you fat loss? And then stick to your strengths. And then that's going to come across with your writing. And stay in your lane. I always tell young writers too, just stay in your lane. Like, there's a reason I don't write about fat loss a lot, and I don't write about nutrition a lot. It's because that's not my strength. My strength is strength and conditioning, helping people get stronger, moving better, squatting, deadlifting, etc. So if you write to your strengths, you'll probably do good things.
Yes. Yeah, that makes
sense. I know, very, very earth-shattering advice I just gave. I know, like.
Well, it's a bit like when you hire a business mentor though, and they just tell you the common sense stuff, but because you're accountable now, you do it, and suddenly stuff starts working. It's the same with with this advice. It's no shit Sherlock type stuff, but
yes, yeah,
it gets the job done. So, well, I know we're running up on time a little bit here. So, with in theory, you might well be in London in September. Fingers crossed.
Oh, I hope. Fingers crossed. Yeah.
At a workshop like that, what could someone expect? I mean, some squat and deadlift chat, I'm sure. And
like my approach is, let's talk about stuff and then let's put it into practice. So I'm certainly not somebody who's going to sit up there and talk for 7 straight hours and just do PowerPoint presentations. Like, I'm going to talk. Hey, here's some stuff I want to discuss. Here's theory. Here's how I do things. Here's my rationale. But now let's take a time out and let's go on the gym floor and put it in practice. Because I don't know about you, I'm pretty sure you would agree with this, but the most value I get when I attend workshops is when I can watch another coach something.
Yes.
So if I can watch somebody take somebody through a shoulder assessment, or watch how they break down deadlift technique, or, how do you make that squat look better, and not only that, make it so that it doesn't hurt their knee, or like, what do you do? I always find a lot of value in that. So that's kind of how I approach it when I'm presenting. Is if I'm just speaking for an hour, of course, that's going to be more of like, okay, here are my slides, and make sure my slides aren't too wordy, and I try to put in like little jokes in the slides, and then people aren't bored, and I try to the strategic F-bomb and stuff like that. But if I'm presenting for a full day, if not 2 days, it's very much like talk practice.
Yes.
I do think it's important to get people moving and to get them to get a feel for these drills I'm showing, and help them kind of like put it in practice themselves.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think that's an important way to do it.
Yeah. Learning how to apply it. That's the key takeaway. It's, the theory's no use if you can't actually apply it and help your clients with it. So I think, I completely agree. And trying to think who it was. One of my mentors or someone I've worked with at one point was like, the best coaches are thieves. And so when you go to one of these, you get to see a really good coach, and basically, you get to steal the stuff you like and then integrate it. And then you do enough of that from enough good coaches, you're going to end up being, should be a really good coach yourself, right?
And I certainly am not someone who's like too revolutionary, and like, I'm not promoting like new shiny objects or anything. I'm very much a fan of like, all right, let's keep it really simple and let's just get really good at doing the simple things. I remember I spoke at an NSCA conference a few years ago, and one of the feedback that I got, and it was on shoulder assessment. Here's how I assess the shoulder. And it was only an hour presentation. There's only so much you can talk about in an hour. I mean, people spend days talking about shoulder assessment. But then one of the pieces of feedback I got was like, oh, well, he didn't say anything new or revolutionary. It was like, and it's like, since when does shoulder assessment have to be new and revolutionary? It's the same anatomy that we've had for centuries, for thousands of years. It's like, why don't we just get good at doing the simple stuff well and not making people feel like they're broken and dysfunctional? I think that's a theme in the industry that I hate, is like this idea that the point of the assessment, or like being someone's coach, is to prove how much of a walking ball of fail they are, and dysfunction, you're broken, I need to fix. Like, honestly, like, asymmetry is normal. Like, I actually lean into it, and like, people have asymmetrical stances when they're squatting, and that's perfectly fine. And people have different hip structures. People have different femur lengths. So I kind of have to roll my eyes when the feedback I get is like, oh, there's nothing revolutionary or new. I was like, well, I mean, why does it have to be that?
It's like my old rugby coach told me, do the basics exceptionally well.
It should be boring, really.
Yeah. Now there we go.
Well, every now and then I like to think, every now and then I'll have a good idea. But you're right. It is an industry of thievery. You know, of course I'm giving credit. You know, and I'm always giving credit when I'm presenting. Like I'm name dropping all the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, the Monday after a 2-day workshop is when the personal training clients are getting a lot of new stuff.
Yeah. Oh, you're mentioning all sorts. You've never mentioned this before. Well, that's one of the other mistakes, I suppose, that people make is they go on these workshops and then suddenly they become like a mini version of you, and they try and be you and deliver everything like that. And as opposed to taking the principles and applying that and using their personality, their skill set.
I mean, I usually try to tell people, like, listen, I've thrown a lot of stuff at you in the last day or two. I would encourage you to like let it marinate a little bit, like, you know, reread your notes, like practice it yourself first for a week or two before you start torturing your clients. But it's inevitable that people are going to be excited to try new things and to, you know, just to, hey, this is new. All my clients do it.
Yeah.
You know, it's inevitable, but that's a good thing. I mean, I could think of worse people they can emulate than myself. So,
well, it's also good that people are excited and enthusiastic. It's just, and then usually they settle themselves down a couple of days later, and then they start to weave it in appropriately. It's just, I've seen it. I mean, I've been guilty of it early in my career.
Of course, we've all done it.
You come back and you are basically a little clone of whoever you've been.
I mean, I remember when PRI was really entering our industry back in like the mid 2000s. Like, I mean, it was hard not to be like become like a breathing coach and like, oh, we got to work on your rib position and breathing, and you know, and eventually you kind of had to pump the brakes a little bit. But like, oh, you know, people actually need to lift heavy things too. Like, we can't just do breathing drills for a half hour. No one gets excited to do that. So, you know, I think any competent coach is going to understand that, yes, you're going to have your own philosophy and way of doing things, but you should be able to, be a little bit of a Geico and like, you know, like steal this, steal that, and apply it to your own principles. And you don't have to become like an exact clone of anyone or any one prototype or protocol, but, you know, everyone's clients are different, and you know, you should be able to kind of cherry pick a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and then apply it to your own clients. I think that's usually the wise way to approach it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, excellent advice, Tony. As I mentioned, we are closing up on time here, so I've got a little change of pace. I've got some questions for you, either or questions.
Okay.
So get to know, and as it's been pointed out to me, all of my questions are very food focused, so you know where my head's at. But anyway, here we go. Is it a pizza or a burger?
Pizza.
Chocolate or peanut butter?
Chocolate. That's a tough one.
Yeah. Well, again, guys, people in the States, they always think harder about that one, and most people just go like both. But beach holiday or a city break?
I was just at the beach last week, and I enjoy it. But I you know, to me, my money is if I can spend a couple days walking around London, I'm completely happy. So that's my choice.
Yeah, you'd quite like my commute at the moment, then. So basically, I walk from Tower Bridge to Westminster.
Oh man, I've been to London 7-8 times, and there's always this one massive walk that I do. I basically start in Piccadilly Circus or Piccadilly Square, and I basically just walk to Covent Garden all the way down to Westminster, back to the South Bank, and into Borough Market. It's like this massive walk that I do. And I just love it every time.
We are actually about to move out of London, but I'll still be.
No, don't do it.
Yeah, but we're not moving like out. Well, we're moving, but we're right by Tower Bridge currently, so we're almost as central as you can be, and we're moving from that. And one thing I will miss is my walk. So
my wife jokes that in a past life I must have lived in London because I just love it there.
Yeah. Well, Borough Market, great place to stop off, get some food, although quite expensive food. But
yes,
my kids go to school just behind there, so it's a frequent walk. So I'm spoilt for that. Like, I suppose the novelty's worn off for me. But getting out and walking is good. I've completely forgotten where I was. Oh, city breaks. Yeah, city breaks.
Yes.
So you went that one. So steak, rare or well done?
I like medium.
Oh the contrarians kicked in. We'll go scrambled or poached eggs.
Scrambled.
Okay. Now, penultimate question from me. Can you tell me something about you that people probably don't already know?
Back when I was probably 11 or 12 years old, I submitted a poem to this, I don't know what it was, but it ended up being published in a book. I do not recall what book it was, but it was like I don't know, it was like a 5-sentence poem. I probably couldn't even recite it right now, to be honest. But,
that's a shame. I was going to ask you
to. Yeah. So, but I just remember that. So that might have been like the blossoming of my writing career back then. It was my first publication was some random poem I wrote as a 12-year-old.
Little did you know it was going to transition to talking about picking heavy stuff up.
Yeah.
Excellent. All right. Good answer. Now, so final question from me is, who should I interview next? You've already given us sort of Mark Fisher and the crew there. Who, if I could interview anyone, who should I interview?
I think my wife would be a good match for you, honestly. Dr. Lisa Lewis.
We haven't had a husband-wife combo on yet. So
yeah, so that's going to be I think she would be a lovely guest for you to interview.
All right, well, we'll set
the industry up. Needs more like, she's an actual doctor of psychology. She's not a mindset coach because she read a book. Like she knows what she's talking about, and she's jacked. So she actually lifts heavy things herself.
I'm going to be asking her about her walks around London. She's going to roll her eyes. Oh, those walks.
Probably, yeah. She's more of a beach person.
Okay, cool. Well, that'd be great. If we get that organised, I'd love to have her on the show. So Tony, before we go, please take a moment, just let everyone know where's the best place to find out more about you.
Yeah, thank you for asking. It's TonyGentilcore.com. That is my hub. So that is my blog. That is all the podcasts I've been on. That is digital resources, upcoming workshops, social media, all that stuff.
Excellent. Right, we'll make sure that is linked in the show notes. And guys, go check it out. And hopefully we'll be seeing you at a workshop.
Oh, that'd be excellent. I hope so. Yes.